I didn't learn this from books. I learned it the night a thriving business went quiet overnight. No warning, no public scandal, no financial mistake anyone could point to. One day, orders were flowing, phones were ringing, staff were busy, and then silence. I was there when the instruction was given, I was present when the agreement was sealed, and I carried the assignment myself. This is not theory, this is testimony. In the spirit, businesses are not just buildings or brands. They are living structures. They breathe through favor. They survive through flow. And when that flow is interrupted, collapse looks natural on the outside, but it is engineered underneath. Witches don't attack businesses the way people imagine. No fire, no noise, no public confrontation. They use living carriers, things that move unnoticed, things that enter legally. That night, 4 animals were named, each one assigned a different function, each one released at a different stage. The first animal is never sent to destroy, it is sent to observe, to study patterns, to learn opening and closing times, to mark peak sales, to memorize customer movement. This animal doesn't attack, it watches. And once it finishes its assignment, the second animal is released. This one affects relationships. Staff begin to misunderstand each other. Minor issues feel heavier. Trust thins out. No shouting yet. Just tension, just confusion. Customers feel it before the owners do. They stop returning. Not because of price, not because of quality. They just don't feel settled anymore. Then comes the third animal. This one touches money. Delays start appearing. Transactions fail. Suppliers become difficult. Unexpected expenses show up. Nothing dramatic, just enough to weaken resistance. And by the time the fourth animal is released, the business is already tired. This final one doesn't rush. It waits. It waits for discouragement. It waits for frustration. It waits for the owner to say, "I don't know what's wrong anymore." That sentence is permission. I remember standing there, hearing the names spoken, knowing exactly which businesses had been selected. Some of them were generous, some were prayerful, some were doing well. Success does not make you invisible. I'm sharing this now because many people blame themselves for what was engineered against them. And because once you can identify the method, you can interrupt the assignment. Stay with me, because I'm going to expose each animal, what it looks like in the physical, and how to shut it down before it completes its cycle. Most people only see failure. I'm about to show you the pattern. I'm not talking about charms on the ground. I'm not talking about idols hidden in shops. I'm talking about animals released spiritually, while owners are fasting, while they are sowing seeds, while they are praying for growth. This is why it works. Because the attack doesn't look like opposition. It looks like life continuing, slightly off. When these animals are released, they are not seen with physical eyes, but they manifest through behavior, through atmosphere, through repetition. I watched this process again and again. A business owner would pray harder, yet results would slow. They would advertise more, yet response would drop. They would work longer hours, yet gain less. And everyone would say, "It's the economy. It's competition. It's just a hard season." But in the spirit, the assignment was already active. The first animal feeds on access. It moves through doors that stay open too long, through places left unguarded, through moments of exhaustion. This is why businesses that are growing fast are targeted faster. Expansion creates exposure. I remember one owner, faithful, disciplined, careful. Nothing was wrong with his structure, nothing was wrong with his pricing, nothing was wrong with his staff. But something was allowed to sit. And once it sat long enough, it signaled the next stage. The second animal doesn't touch money first, it touches peace. Meetings become heavy, decisions take longer. Joy drains out of the work. People start saying, "I don't know why this place feels different." That feeling is not emotional, it is environmental. In the spirit, peace is a defense system. When peace is disturbed, discernment weakens. That's when the third animal is activated. This one interferes with flow. Customers intend to come, but something delays them. Payments are promised, but something interrupts them. I saw accounts that should have grown, stall. Not collapse, stall. Because stalling creates frustration, and frustration opens mouths. Complaints increase. Words spoken in anger increase. Statements like, "This business is stressful," or "I'm tired of this place," are released. Words are fuel. And by the time the fourth animal arrives, the environment is ready. This one does not touch finances directly. It touches resolve. The owner begins to question their calling. They consider quitting. They lose clarity. This is the most dangerous stage, because nothing looks attacked. Everything looks internal. I stood in gatherings where this was celebrated, when owners began to withdraw, when passion faded, when vision dimmed. That was considered success. I'm confessing this because silence protects systems like this, and because many people are fighting symptoms without addressing the sequence. These animals operate in order. If you break the order, the assignment collapses. This is why awareness matters. In the next part, I will name the first animal, how it shows up in the physical, and the exact moment it is usually released. Because once you recognize it, you stop blaming yourself. As someone who once participated in spiritual operations against businesses, and later sat across from believers whose finances were under pressure they couldn't explain, I need to say this carefully, because ignorance here costs people years. When I was involved, we didn't target ideas, we didn't target effort, we targeted alignment. A business can work hard and still be exposed, because effort does not seal spiritual access. I've watched owners fast, I've watched them pray, I've watched them give, and still lose ground, because the point of entry was never addressed. In warfare, nothing is random. Every operation follows order. Animals are not chosen for symbolism, they are chosen for function. One carries monitoring, one carries division, one carries restriction, one carries closure. And the terrifying part is this: most of the time the owner helps complete the cycle without knowing. I've seen it happen. The moment discouragement settles in, decisions start shifting. Prayer becomes rushed, discernment dulls, covering weakens. And that is when the operation advances. Let me confess this: there were businesses we never needed to touch twice. One release was enough. Because once access was gained, the system inside the business did the rest. Employees turned against leadership. Leadership doubted vision. Vision lost clarity. And the outside world called it market conditions. But in the spirit, it was classified as a completed assignment. This is why I speak with restraint. Because once you understand how these attacks move, you stop blaming yourself and you start reclaiming authority. I'm not here to frighten you. I'm here to expose structure. And exposure breaks continuity. In the next moments, I'm going to name the first animal in detail, how it enters, what signs it leaves, and why most people mistake its presence for coincidence. Listen closely, because the earliest stage is the easiest to stop. As someone who once participated in spiritual operations against businesses, and later sat across tables with believers whose finances were under pressure they couldn't explain, I need to say this carefully, because ignorance here is costly. When I was inside that system, we didn't guess, we confirmed. We confirmed which businesses were covered, which ones were open, which ones had walls, and which ones had gaps. Prayer alone was not what stopped an assignment. Awareness did. I've watched people fast sincerely and still lose contracts. I've seen generous owners experience sudden blockage without understanding why. The problem was never effort, it was visibility. In spiritual warfare, what you can identify, you can confront. What you can confront, you can interrupt. But what you don't see works quietly. When I began counseling after leaving that life, the patterns were impossible to ignore. Different people, different cities, same sequence. First confusion, then tension, then financial strain, then exhaustion. And every time, the owner blamed themselves. No one told them the truth. Some attacks are structured. Which is why this confession matters. I'm not speaking as a spectator. I'm speaking as someone who understands the order, the timing, and the signs. Because once you recognize which stage you're in, you can stop the next release. And that knowledge has saved businesses that were days away from closing. Now let me take you deeper. Not into fear, but into clarity. The first animal causes slow loss, not sudden collapse. That's how it avoids detection. It doesn't touch profits directly at first, it touches momentum. Small leaks, missed opportunities, customers who meant to return but didn't. When I carried this assignment, we were told, if it breaks suddenly, they will fight it. If it fades slowly, they will accept it. And acceptance is dangerous. The second animal affects customers and contracts. This one is released near entrances, around meeting places, along communication lines. Emails go unanswered, deals stall without explanation. Verbal agreements dissolve. People say, let's wait, let's think about it, I'll get back to you, and they never do. This animal makes favor feel distant, not blocked, just unreachable. The third animal targets workers, partners, and helpers. This one creates weariness. Staff lose motivation, key people resign unexpectedly, loyal helpers begin to complain. Nothing dramatic, just fatigue, just heaviness. The owner starts doing everything alone. And when you stand alone long enough, discouragement begins to speak. But the fourth one? This one is not released casually. It is used when witches want a business to never recover again. This animal is tied to remembrance. It returns to places where loss happened. It revisits closed doors. It reinforces failure memories. So even when opportunities appear, fear responds first. Owners hesitate. They delay. They second guess. And eventually they say, I tried already. I don't want to go through that again. That is the real shutdown. Most people pray harder and still don't understand why nothing changes. I used to listen to those prayers. They were sincere, they were loud, they were emotional. But they were fighting blind. In the spirit, precision matters. If you don't address the correct assignment, you only strengthen the resistance. I am confessing this because I know the order. I know the timing. I know what is sent first and what is sent last. And in the next part, I will reveal how these animals show up physically, in homes, in offices, in surroundings people ignore. Because once you can identify them, you don't just pray harder, you pray accurately. I want to take you back to one case that never left me. The owner was doing everything right, clean records, honest staff, quality product. No shortcuts, no shady dealings, no compromise. He paid salaries early, gave to charity, even prayed over the business every morning. In the natural, nothing was wrong, but then, small things started slipping. One delivery arrived late, then another. A loyal customer complained for the first time. He brushed it off. Then sales dipped just a little, not enough to panic. But the next week the dip stayed. He increased prayer, woke up earlier, fastened his focus. And strangely, the more he prayed, the more the losses multiplied. Machines started breaking without explanation. Staff began calling in sick. One argument turned into 3. Fear crept in quietly. He checked his books again. Everything balanced. He called experts. They found nothing. He blamed the economy, then competition, then himself. At night, he couldn't sleep. During the day, he forced smiles. I watched him from the other side. In the spirit, the assignment had already passed phase 1. The observing animal had finished its work. Patterns were mapped, weak points noted. That's why the attack felt intelligent, targeted, personal. When believers don't see a physical cause, they often assume they didn't pray enough. So they pray harder. But prayer without discernment can feel like shouting into a closed door. He anointed the floors, played worship music, called friends to agree with him. And still, money slipped through his hands. Emotionally, he was breaking. Confusion became frustration. Frustration turned into quiet anger. He began questioning himself. Did I offend God? Did I miss a step? Is this punishment? That emotional pressure was not random. In warfare, emotional exhaustion is a tool. Because when clarity fades, access opens. This is where many believers make the wrong conclusion. They assume persistence alone will fix what requires exposure. They fight harder, but in the wrong direction. And while they are looking upward for answers, the real activity is happening around the gates of their business. I knew the turning point was close, but not the one he was expecting. Because deliverance doesn't always begin with louder prayers. Sometimes it begins with realizing you are not dealing with failure at all. You are dealing with a system. By the time the first animal is released, most business owners still feel safe. Because nothing breaks, nothing crashes, nothing alarms the mind. This one is sent for patience, not speed. In the spirit, we called it the silent drain. Not because it empties everything at once, but because it teaches loss how to look normal. This animal is assigned to profit flow, not income flow. You can still be earning and still be draining. I watched it happen to a logistics company. Strong contracts, good reputation, steady customers. After the release, money still came in, but it could never stay. Every gain was followed by a quiet exit. Fuel costs rose without reason, small repairs became frequent, staff errors increased, late penalties appeared, nothing big enough to panic over, everything small enough to ignore. And that is the fear this animal feeds on. The fear of saying something is wrong when everything looks fine. In the spirit, this animal represents gradual weakening, not attack, erosion. It works best where people are disciplined, hardworking, and responsible, because such people blame themselves first. They budget harder, they work longer hours, they cut personal comfort, and the drain continues. Here is what many don't understand. Prayer alone doesn't always stop this animal. Not because prayer lacks power, but because this assignment survives on legality. This animal enters through access points, spoken agreements, unguarded generosity, covenants made without awareness. When profit keeps leaking and prayer feels sincere, but nothing shifts, it means the door hasn't been addressed. I remember the night I realized this. I had fasted, I had prayed, I had declared, and still the assignment remained active. That was when my instructor said, "You're fighting strength with strength, but you haven't challenged permission." That sentence broke something open in me. The moment permission was revoked, the drain slowed. Not instantly, but noticeably. Bills stopped matching income exactly. Margins began to breathe again. Pressure lifted. That's the result when the first animal is exposed. So listen carefully to the signs. Income leaks you can't explain. Constant small losses. Money coming in, but never staying. If you've said, "I earn, but I'm always catching up," this may already be familiar. If this sounds like your story, comment, "I see it," because awareness weakens concealment. But this one rarely works alone, and once the drain is established, the second animal is released. By the time the second animal is released, the business is still standing, but something feels off. This animal doesn't touch money first, it touches perception. I remember the exact season it happened. It was supposed to be the busiest period of the year. Orders were expected. Appointments were booked, partnerships were already discussed, and then resistance. Not complaints, not arguments, just withdrawal. Clients who were excited suddenly became distant. Messages were read and not answered. Meetings were postponed without explanation. One deal collapsed 12 hours before signing. Another client said, "I don't know why, I just don't feel settled anymore." That sentence again. This animal creates emotional distance without confrontation. It doesn't make customers angry, it makes them indifferent. They don't fight you, they drift. I watched business owners blame themselves. They changed prices, they improved services, they apologized for things they didn't do. And the more they tried to fix it naturally, the heavier it felt emotionally. This animal feeds on confusion. I know this because I carried this assignment once. It was released near entrances, reception areas, waiting spaces. It doesn't enter to destroy, it enters to whisper, to influence feelings, to create sudden dislike with no logical cause. Customers still recommend competitors, they just stop choosing you, and the emotional toll is heavy. Owners begin to question themselves. Staff sense rejection, confidence weakens. This weakening is intentional. Spiritually, this animal functions as a divider. It separates favor from visibility. You are still skilled, still capable, still consistent. But favor no longer rests the same way. That's why nothing you change seems to work. This is not punishment, it is interference. And interference can be confronted. If you've ever experienced clients pulling away suddenly, deals collapsing at the last minute, people saying, "I don't know why, I just don't like this place anymore." Type "open my eyes" in the comments, because awareness breaks agreement. But listen carefully. This second animal is not the most dangerous. It only prepares the ground. The next animal is worse because it doesn't target customers. It attacks helpers. And when helpers fall, businesses don't just struggle, they become isolated. By the time the third animal is released, the business is already weakened. This one is called the helper scatterer. Not because it attacks strangers, but because it touches the people closest to the work. In the spirit, every business survives through helpers. Staff, partners, trusted hands, people who carry vision even when the owner is not present. This animal is not sent to destroy profit directly, it is sent to fracture loyalty. I remember the first time I saw it released. There was no shouting, no ritual drama, just a calm instruction. Scatter the helpers. That was the command. Before this animal moves, the business looks healthy. Staff arrive early, they stay late, they protect the owner's interest. They speak well of the business, even outside. There is alignment. After this animal begins its work, nothing looks the same, but everything looks normal. Sudden misunderstandings, words taken the wrong way. Small corrections feel like personal attacks. One staff member feels overlooked. Another feels cheated. Another begins to listen to outside voices. No open rebellion yet, just quiet withdrawal. I've watched loyal workers wake up one morning and decide, I'm done, with no clear explanation. They can't even explain it properly themselves. This animal feeds on offense. It amplifies feelings, it exaggerates perception. And once one helper leaves, the rest begin to question their place. This is how scattering works. I need to say this clearly. Fasting alone often doesn't fix this. Because fasting weakens flesh, but this animal operates through authority gaps. When there is confusion about leadership roles or spiritual covering, it finds space. In the scriptures, there is a principle. A structure divided within itself cannot stand. That is not a sermon. That is a law. This animal does not need to touch money if it can separate people from purpose. I saw owners blame themselves. They assumed they were bad leaders. They assumed they missed something. Sometimes yes, but sometimes an assignment was released. And here's the part I rarely hear spoken. The helper scatterer fears exposure. Once its pattern is identified, it loses grip. When owners stop reacting emotionally and begin responding with authority, this animal weakens. Not shouting, not panic, authority. I am sharing this because someone listening right now is watching staff leave one by one and wondering what changed. Something was sent, and it can be stopped. Share this with a business owner who is losing staff suddenly. Because the next animal is the one witches hesitate to use. Not because it doesn't work, but because of what follows after. The fourth animal is never released casually. It is named only after reports are given, after the watchers have spoken, after the confusion has done its work, after finances have been weakened. This one is not sent to test, it is sent to conclude. In the coven, we called it the marker, because once it enters, everything is already measured. This animal is used only when the first three did not succeed fully, when the business resisted, when prayers were made, when covering existed. Some businesses survive observation, some survive confusion, some survive financial pressure. But this one targets endurance. When the shutdown marker is released, nothing dramatic happens at first. No scandal, no sudden collapse, no obvious attack. Just stillness. Calls stop. Opportunities dry up. Every attempt to restart feels heavy. Rebranding doesn't work. Marketing doesn't work. New staff doesn't help. The doors are open but movement is gone. This animal doesn't destroy the building, it sits on the gate. I watch business owners pray harder at this stage, fast longer, give more, and still nothing moved. Because this assignment feeds on exhaustion. It waits for hope to thin out. It waits for confidence to weaken. It waits for the owner to say, maybe it's just not meant to work. That sentence seals it. This is why recovery feels impossible for some people. Not because prayer failed, but because the gate was occupied. In the spirit, every business has a gate. That's where flow enters. That's where favor passes through. The shutdown marker doesn't attack from inside. It blocks entry. Revenue can't find its way back. Partnerships don't locate you. Ideas feel dry. And time becomes your enemy. I remember one assignment clearly. The business had survived for years. They had intercessors. They prayed daily. When the fourth animal was mentioned, the room went quiet. Even witches respect resistance. This one was released because nothing else worked. Within months, the owner tried to relaunch 3 times. Each attempt failed without explanation. No errors, no scandals, no logical reason. Just repeated disappointment. And the most dangerous part? The longer it stays, the harder it is to recognize. People stop fighting. They accept stagnation as normal. They say this season is just slow, but seasons move. Markers don't. This is why some businesses never bounce back, even after prayer. Because prayer was made, but the gate was never cleared. I'm confessing this because many people are blaming themselves for a warfare they were never taught to recognize. And if you're still listening right now, it means this message is not accidental. If this resonates with your experience, if you've tried again and again and nothing moved, comment "Deliver me" if you're still watching. Because in the next section, I'll reveal how this marker is identified and how its hold is broken before it convinces you to quit. Stay with me. There was a moment when everything shifted for me, not because I wanted to change sides, but because I saw something fail that was never supposed to fail. The animals had been released, the stages had been completed. By every rule I knew at the time, the business should have closed. But it didn't. At first, I thought the timing was off, that maybe the resistance was slow. Then I realized the resistance was not slow. It was aware. No shouting prayers, no dramatic confrontation, no announcement. Just alignment. The owner didn't know the animals, didn't know the system, didn't even know there was an assignment. But they were standing in the correct position. In the spirit, position matters more than noise. That's when I learned something that unsettled me. Attacks don't stop because you fight harder. They stop because they lose access. That business was not defended with rituals. Nothing was performed. Nothing was exchanged. What happened was quieter than that. Certain doors were no longer open. Certain permissions were no longer active. And when permission ends, activity expires. I watched confusion move backward. I watched delays lift without explanation. I watched money flow resume as if nothing had happened. And the animals, they didn't get destroyed. They were recalled. That detail matters. In warfare, recall only happens when the assignment is no longer valid. That moment broke something in me. I realized many people are fighting effects instead of correcting position. They shout at what is only responding to an earlier agreement. When the agreement is addressed, the response has nothing to obey. I'm confessing this because fear keeps people reactive, and reaction creates more access. The people who stay calm are usually the ones who are covered. I've seen attacks stop mid-cycle, not because someone learned a method, but because alignment returned. This is why awareness matters, not obsession, awareness. When people finally address the root, the activity stops. Not instantly, not dramatically, but decisively. And this is where I need to pause the story. Because the next part explains why some businesses recover and others keep repeating the same collapse. It has nothing to do with effort and everything to do with authority. If you've noticed patterns repeating, if things improve and then break again, that detail matters. I'll expose that next. Stay with me. There is a moment in every assignment when silence becomes dangerous. That moment is when signs begin to show, but the owner explains them away. Small losses feel normal. Strange resistance feels like stress. Repeated setbacks feel like bad timing. But in the spirit, those are signals. I ignored them once, and it cost more than money. I watched businesses bleed slowly, not because help wasn't available, but because awareness was delayed. The greatest advantage used against people is not power. It is ignorance. When patterns repeat without reason, when favor dries up without explanation, when effort increases but results reduce, that is not random. I'm warning you now because I stayed quiet before. And silence makes you an accomplice. When light is absent, operations continue uninterrupted. But the moment light enters, agreements weaken. I've seen assignments scatter simply because they were identified. No shouting, no drama, just exposure. Animals released in the spirit lose direction when authority is restored. They move by instruction. They retreat when instruction is broken. This is where empowerment begins. Knowledge does not make you afraid. It makes you alert, and alertness restores authority. You don't fight blindly. You stand informed. When you recognize what is touching your work, your finances, your staff, your peace, you stop blaming yourself, and you stop submitting unknowingly. I am not sharing this to terrify you. I am sharing this because awakening ends cycles. Light does not argue, it reveals. And when operations are revealed, they cannot continue the same way. If this message is reaching you, it means interruption is still possible. Pay attention to what you've been dismissing. Review what changed suddenly. Notice what no longer flows the way it used to. These observations are not fear. They are wisdom. This is not to scare you. It is to awaken you. Because once you see clearly, You are no longer easy to touch. There is something I must admit. By the time the fourth animal was released, I already knew which businesses would survive and which ones would not. Not because of money, not because of intelligence, but because of awareness. In the spirit, ignorance is access. Some owners kept fighting symptoms, others addressed the root. I watched as one business owner began to pray harder, but never changed posture. Another fasted, but kept agreeing with fear. And a third did something different. They stopped reacting and started discerning. They asked questions most people never ask. Why did this start suddenly? Why does peace leave this place after closing hours? Why does progress stall at the same point every time? That questioning disrupted the assignment. In the spirit, when an assignment is exposed, it loses authority. I remember the moment the final animal was recalled. The atmosphere shifted, not loudly, not emotionally, just clarity. Staff harmony returned, money flow stabilized, customers came back without explanation. The business didn't just recover, it became guarded. That was the moment I understood something that eventually pulled me out completely. Darkness survives on secrecy. It weakens when named. That's why I'm speaking now. Not to frighten you, but to remove shame. If you've been asking, what am I doing wrong? This message may be your answer. You are not cursed. You are not foolish. You may simply be fighting blind. These systems depend on silence, on people explaining away patterns. But once you see, you can respond correctly. And no assignment completes its cycle once its method is revealed. So if this message connected with you, don't rush past it. Let it settle. Like this video so others don't stay unaware. Subscribe, because exposure brings freedom. And remember, light doesn't panic, it reveals.